Hello. Sorry if I haven't streamed in a while, just been busy. Yeah, today we're reacting to a guy who doesn't think Australia exists. And I already saw a little bit of this. It's hilarious. Anyways, this guy's weird, so let's just get into it.
This is Rag Reynolds. He's a Scottish YouTuber who's convinced that the entire country of Australia
Nice
doesn't
thumbnail,
really
though.
exist.
There's no proof that it exists. It's a fantasy. It's no more real than Narnia.
And while he'd eventually get into arguments with other large
Just
Australian
turn it down
creators,
a
host podcasts.
It's a little loud on my side. Yeah, I'm using the phone for this. I'm just lazy today.
In which he'd tell Australians that they weren't real, and even attempt to visit the non-existent country himself. His conspiracy theory began to develop on the 22nd.
Quiet. Yeah, this guy's straight up.
2014, when he'd start to express his hatred for the country.
If you could destroy one country in the world, which would it be? This is, without a doubt, the easiest question to ever answer. Because the answer is Australia. That country is a waste of space. That country is the worst place on Earth. Australia. Bad.
That clip comes from one of the earliest videos posted to Rag Reynolds'
You're
channel,
bad.
and it highlights it in the beginning. Although he clearly hated Australia, he still considered it a real place. Yet this hatred wasn't only confined to his YouTube channel. He'd post tweets such as a public service, I will personally burn Australia to the ground, let's send Australia to space, as well as one final banger reading, if Australia wins Eurovision, I will drown one puppy and burn one baby for every point they win by. Rag Reynolds didn't specify exactly where this hatred had come from.
How are they going to
as
get
time
to
progressed,
space?
his dislike for the country only continued to grow. Just over 2 years after initially stating that he'd like to burn Australia to the ground, he'd upload a new video simply titled Down with Australia, in which he began to outline why he hated the country so much, with his first point being that we simply have an annoying accent.
Australians have the second most irritating accents on Earth, beaten only by South Africans. Every time I hear a pathetic Australian say, "Mate," I just want to punch them in their good-for-nothing liver. Since it's common knowledge that all Australians are alcoholics, a punch to an Australian's liver would most likely be fatal.
Before he display a map showing that Australians have an average IQ of 60, being the lowest out of any country in the entire world.
Speaking of how dumb Australians are, the image on screen now is an IQ map of the world. As you can see, Australia has the lowest average IQ out of every single country on the planet.
Yeah, while these points showed that Rag Reynolds still believed in Australia's existence, it wasn't going to stay like this for much longer. Only 8 months after uploading Down with Australia, Rag Reynolds' hatred for the country would transform into the belief that Australia didn't exist at all.
I was certainly pretty mad over the existence of Australia, and then without warning, I came across some guy on Twitter claiming that Australia does not exist. This was a theory I had never even considered prior.
It does exist.
I just found out that Australia isn't actually a real place.
Can't
believe I was mad about that place for so long. It all makes sense. I'm trying to be too rude or anything. Rag Reynolds,
I don't care if I'm rude to him.
Denier.
Now, Rag Reynolds' disbelief in
He's
Australia
rude to his own
exactly
fans.
an original idea. He even claimed in the previous clip that his theory
some of his fans may have even been Australian. So
in fact, the conspiracy theory dates all the way back to November of 2006, when the
just
following
going too
post was
far,
made to the
man.
Flat Earth forums. Most of you have probably been brought up believing in the imaginary land called Australia. I bet many of you even learned about it in school. Well, the fact is that Australia doesn't really exist. Everything you've ever heard about it was made up, and any pictures of it you've seen were faked by the government. I'm sure you've even talked to people on the internet who claim to be from Australia. They are really secret government agents who are surfing the internet to enforce these false beliefs. We're not exactly sure why the government made up an imaginary continent, or why it is trying to convince the world that this continent is real, but we can tell you that we know for a fact that Australia doesn't really exist. Please join us in our quest to convince the world of the truth. However, as you might be able to gather from this reply, there wasn't exactly all that much evidence for the theory. There was one individual who posted a world map with and without Australia in the bottom right-hand corner, and while this didn't exactly constitute evidence, the lack of proof for the theory hasn't stopped a select group of people from believing it to be true. In April of 2018, more than 200 individuals gathered in the UK city of Birmingham to discuss whether or not Australia was real, and while it's easy to laugh and scorn from a distance, one of the attendees actually had a pretty reasonable argument for why the theory might be true. Australia is not real. It's a hoax made for us to believe that Britain moved over their criminals to some place. In reality, all these criminals were loaded
I live in Australia myself,
before they could see land ever again. It's a cover-up for one of the greatest mass murders in history.
Bad luck for
made by
you.
one of the most prominent empires. Now, to give credit where credit is due, this post establishes a pretty solid motive for why someone might have wanted to fake the country. However, as the post continued, it only got wackier and the credibility began to crumble. Your Australian friends,
I just
they're all
wanted to watch
actors and
this since I'm an
computer-generated
Australian
personas,
myself.
part of the plot
Mostly
to trick the
because
world.
I thought
If
it
you
would
think
be
you've ever been to
hilarious.
Australia, you're terribly
And I
wrong.
came for the
plane
right
pilots
content.
are all in on this and have in all actuality only flown you to islands close nearby, or in some cases parts of South America, where they have cleared space and hired actors to act out as real Australians. However, this is the point at which Rag Reynolds begins to stand out as unique, as he actually has his own theory for why Australia has been faked.
The theory goes like this. The founder of New Zealand hated how his people sounded when they spoke. It was necessary to make their
And then
country
Game Theory
known as
made a new
anything
channel
other
called
than
World
the worst
Theory.
perceived country known
And they
to
made a
man.
theory
So
on
he got his
Australia
council
years
together
ago.
and they put together a plan.
That would
They
be
were going to
hilarious.
take all of the worst parts of their culture, make it 50 times worse, ingrain it into the minds of 100 citizens with the lowest IQs, and then put those people into an abandoned city together with cameras on them 24/7. New Zealand had essentially set
I'm
out to create a
tight today,
full reality
honestly.
show in order to fool the world into
Had to
thinking
go to
that there was a
school
place
earlier,
worse
blah
than their
blah, that other
homeland.
kind of
Rag
stuff.
Reynolds would then go on to add that Australia's unique wildlife, such as kangaroos, had been roboticized by New Zealand in order to reinforce the lie.
They decided it might be a good idea to start introducing strange new animals, so they created the robotic creature that we know today as a kangaroo.
With his evidence for this claim being a debate.org poll,
A poll
Clearly
shows that people are
kangaroo
beginning
meat.
to actually wake up and realize the truth that there's no Australia. 37%
This
think
is
yes,
hilarious.
but 63% say no.
What? Next is he gonna say the kangaroo meat is actually pig meat, which is beef. No, beef is cow meat. Pork chop. And the pork chop, they're actually pretending it's a new type of meat called kangaroo meat. And they put drugs or some kind of salty stuff or whatever, some kind of fluid or liquid, whatever, to make it taste different and smell different. And they chopped it up a little bit to make it look different. Kangaroo meat does exist. I've seen it, but I haven't tried it. That's all I need to say. I've seen it. Because, well, of course, I live in Australia, so...
A compelling
that
argument
sound?
is made here by a user
That's the
going by
worst.
the name of Massive
Nora's
Dump.
laugh
Rag Reynolds'
ever.
conspiracy theory pitch would receive
Oh,
a
it did better
dislike
then.
ratio of over
Why am I
94%. However,
still
the comments
freaking
were
out?
surprisingly supportive. Being an Australian myself, I completely agree with this theory. I'm totally not a secret robot living on planet Oogly Boogly. Being from Australia, I'm shocked that such a genius found out our secret. We are all not real. Thank you for enlightening me on the heinous truth about Australia. I no longer
Yeah,
think
believe
that
what
it
you want,
exists.
but bad
Thank
luck
Rag
for you,
Reynolds.
it does
However,
exist.
while these Australians
And
have
face
successfully
the
been
truth
convinced
for
that they
once.
didn't actually exist, others
Even if
need
you
a
have
little
before,
more
you
persuading,
have to
which
do
led
it
to a
again
Rag
because
Reynolds
it does
podcast
exist.
episode on which he would invite 3 different Australians to argue about whether or not they existed.
I'm joined by self-proclaimed Australians as they're going to attempt to explain to me just why they think that Australia is a real place.
While the people on the podcast made some pretty reasonable points, Rag Reynolds couldn't be convinced, and if anything, judging by these videos, it would only further strengthen his belief that Australia wasn't real. However, it would be with these videos that the hornet's nest was stirred up, as shortly after posting them, other larger YouTubers began to make videos on the stupidity of Rag Reynolds' theory. The third largest YouTuber in Australia, Laserbeam, would upload a video titled "It Turns Out Australia is Fake."
No one's given literally any evidence. Nothing. They've just yelled at me and said it's fake.
Prompting a response titled "Dear Laserbeam, you are delusional."
He thinks he is from a place that he is not really from. He is clearly just drugged up. He does not seem to understand.
Oh, why do I keep using my fake laugh as my real laugh? But it's because I'm used to it. The face keeps blacking out. The camera's really good though. So yeah. Why does he think? Okay, apparently drugs can freaking get you to believe Australia is a real place. There's no drugs like that. I mean, drugs can make you think that, but still though. Basically, no one ever thinks that because they already know Australia does exist. I'm gonna turn my aircon. Because it does exist, and honestly, What? I'm not even gonna question it anymore. Let's continue.
And logic, reason, ignores facts.
Which was followed by Rag Reynolds getting into a full-blown YouTube war with one of Australia's most patriotic creators, Isaac Butterfield, leading both of them to argue about the theory on Isaac's podcast.
Maybe I've been coming at you from the wrong orientation.
Taste man now.
Today, I could fix that.
It seemed as though
It's hilarious
Reynolds
how
was
actual
never going to
Australia
change his mind on Australia's existence. However, shortly after beefing with these larger creators, the first sign of him coming back to reality appeared, specifically when he'd upload a video simply titled I Was Wrong.
And now it's all starting to make a bit more sense. And now I don't know what to think. My main piece of evidence, my own experience, is not actual evidence. It's not what I thought it was. All I have left is speculation and theories.
And when looking at the comments on the video, one highlighted the most
Well, your
effective
theories
way
are
for
dumb.
Rag Reynolds to confirm whether or not his
I
suspicions
still
were
think
true.
he thinks
Why not
it's
book a ticket
fake,
to
because
Australia to
it's
see
pretty
it for
obvious.
real? And this is exactly what he would do, although apparently this would only reinforce to Rag Reynolds that the country was in fact fake. He'd explain all of this in a video titled I Went
Why
to
has he got a
Australia, It
green
Isn't
screen
Real,
sitting
in which
in
he'd
a
explained
chair?
that during his trip he had seen some things leading him to believe that it was a real place, although ultimately
you
he
went
believed that he
there,
had been drugged by
then
the
you
New
clearly
Zealand
saw it
government,
was
and the
real.
whole thing was simply a hallucination.
When people go to Australia, they're actually landing in New Zealand. They are drugged. They imagine all of the experiences there.
Naturally, his audience began to call him out by stating that he never even went there in the first place, resulting in Rag Reynolds taking a
Yeah,
polygraph
he probably
test to
didn't.
confirm that he had in fact been to Australia.
I am a truth
Why am
talker.
I so big?
Everything I say in my videos is the truth, and this polygraph test has just confirmed that.
However, by
Why
this
is he
point,
wearing
it
a
seemed as though
tux?
the criticism was
I
getting
didn't-
all too much for him. In September of 2020, Rag Reynolds would upload a video titled I'm Sorry Australia, in which he'd explained that he was struggling to deal with the negativity.
The hate I get, folks.
I don't
the abuse I get
know
in my comment
about
section on every
that.
single
He's
video.
lying.
People disliking my videos, my Instagram DMs, there's people being horrible to me. I don't know where it ends. It just goes on and it goes on, and it never seems to stop.
And that maybe after everything, he was in the wrong and it was time to
He's either
apologize.
faking crying or
Maybe
not.
you people
I don't
are right.
know.
It's time for me to issue
I still
the
think
first
he thinks
apology
it's fake.
of my entire life.
This apology would come in one final video titled Australia Does Exist, during which, after all of this time, Rag Reynolds would finally admit that Australia was a real place.
Australia is real. Of course it's a real place. You can see pictures of it from satellites in space. They have lovely wildlife. And I would like to apologise to all Australians out there. Australians, Australia, I am sorry.
You're
Only
lying.
Rag Reynolds was very careful about the date on which this video was uploaded. April 1st, also known as April Fool's Day.
April Fools! You're all drugged up and brainwashed.
And to this day, Rag Reynolds is still convinced that Australia isn't real.
That's probably gonna go in time as the worst April Fool's joke ever. I think you're the one that's drugged up. It does exist. Fine, believe what you want, but like, I live there, so bad luck for you, person who doesn't think Australia doesn't exist. This is hilarious. Anyways, well, that was something to witness, so have a good day. Goodbye now.